Like many terms that we subscribe to, how often do we sit to unpack the dimensions, hidden and known, when it comes to what we're actually subscribing to? It is so easy to get swept up with the common thing or what the echo chamber of social media is speaking about. But one thing that, well, Daniel is phenomenal at is taking one word and showing that, well, pulling apart the iceberg that sits below the one term, and that's what we'll be doing today. And today that is about equality. You only need to look on social media very quickly and you see all the professionals touting the same thing, all subscribing to the exact same thing, but without actually inspecting what or questioning what it is they're subscribing to. So we're going to look at equality, but I'll tell you where this episode actually came from. So I posted a reel where I was sharing a story from a client who had a past life regression. And she's also had dreams of a similar nature where the man in the dream, whatever character the man has played, has triumphed, has come up on top, has held power, authority, status, success, and everything a man could want in the world. But then she's had dreams where she was a woman and they did not end so pleasantly. Whether it was pillage, death, murder, exile, call it what you want, there was not much love and not a happy ending for the females that this person was experiencing. So over time, there was a very deep unconscious belief that established itself. Man equals good and females equal bad. Man is successful. Female or woman, being a woman is hard. Very simple belief. So she learnt that to survive as a woman, I must act like a man. So how does that play out in this life? She is a corporate type A, the perfect people pleaser. She's people pleased to the extent that there's not much of her left in her own reality. She gives, but does not replenish and has really filled up her life with everyone else's everything else. And she's climbing the corporate ladder, but is questioning, why am I doing this? Is something unfulfilling? And I won't go into her personal, more personal challenges that she's having. So when the higher self presented this, that over time, there's such a deep belief that women have always, the short end of the stick, call it what you want, have not come out on top. In the comment section of the reel came up the question of equality. Is this actually fair? Is this equal? Why is this the case? Why do men, well, there is a comment, especially in the feminist movement, why do men have it better? But we're not going to go down that path so much.
What exactly is the type A that you mentioned, the corporate?
The perfectionists, they're so good at what they do. They're the ones who will stay back, that will get the work done. They are the most reliable. They are the ones who get the promotions. They're the ones who go all in. Sort of like the heckler that you were sitting in at the concert. It just reminded us of like this perfect yes man to corporate, high performance, high achievement, high functioning, high everything. That's your type A people.
So then what's type B?
A little bit less, but just as traumatized.
Right. So the whole system's rigged then.
Pretty much.
I mean, just even like the equality stuff we want to speak to as well. Even trying to define that acts in a system that already has so many beliefs as well, that itself is often rigged.
Well, that too is, and we won't spend too much time in the corporate sphere, but people are, even just with the term equality, they just take it to the corporate sphere and wanting to put more minorities in structures that ultimately were not built with them in mind, do not have their advantage, their ultimate spiritual advantage or best interest in mind. So they're trying to play this game within systems that
Games within games.
Games within games, layers within layers, turtles all the way down, that do not have you in mind. So tell us about, by definition, what is equality?
I mean, this is why I love epistemology, and I don't give it enough respect, but epistemology basically means the study of knowledge. How do we know what we know? And so with that, equality by definition is about using measurement to make things the same. If you had two glasses, you fill them up equally. Or if you have two sides of the scale, you try and balance them so they're equal. And so it's just a principle of balance. For example, you look at like justice, for example, and the punishment fits the crime. It's this sort of equality, this balance that they're trying to create. But the challenge with the world that we actually see is that everyone is different, has different needs, is at different stages, and trying to put us all in the box of equality through this framework of sameness doesn't really work. This is why, I recall being in school, and I'm sure most others have as well, where some kids would excel and then others would just lag behind. And even though there's many factors that actually play into that, what's really happening? They're flattening the model, they're pushing for certain grades, and they're trying to treat everyone like they're the same. And, with our spiritual work and clients we've seen completely the opposite. People have such different needs, as you mentioned with, past lives and these traumatic beliefs that they've had instilled deep in their unconscious. These types of distortions require different approaches and different levels or different expressions of, say, compassion and love for these people to actually find their balance as well. So really, the concept of equality, it's not an absolute good per se. It's really just a paradigm and a model for us to begin to balance out the resources or whatever that it is that we measure. I don't know if you've seen, there's this little sketch, and they've got equality versus equity. Mm-hmm. And then inequality, so there's this fence, and it's like a football game or something being played on the other side. You have a tall kid, a medium kid, and a short kid. And so by equality, each one gets a single box. So now to stand on. And now the tall kid can get an even better view. The medium kid can barely see, and the short kid can't see at all still, even with the box. Where, say, we apply equity, where we actually change that around. So it's not exactly equality, but it's trying to bring the same result. The tall kid gets no boxes because he can already see. The medium kid gets one box so he can see, and the short kid gets two boxes so he can also see. And so already we're seeing a model like this that shows that equality doesn't fix the problem. And so what do you think when you hear equality? What comes? It's such a loaded term it's so gripped in today's world. What comes to your mind when you think equality, Elinor?
I always struggled with adhering to this because it doesn't take in merit. It doesn't take into consideration where I've been, where I want to go, or where other people have been and where other people want to go. And it tries just to shuffle the scorecard and make it look equitable on the outset. But then when you actually lift the hood, I'm talking more to corporate where I've had more direct experiences with this.
But it's very fitting. You'll see a lot of this on social media. You'll see a lot of it on TV. But then that narrative does get pushed.
Yeah. And then you see people who've made, careers out of this and get paid, handsome positions to, DEI and all these buzzwords and acronyms. But then there were always holes in how they would approach things because they're wanting equality, but, for one part that they come in with a lot of biases because of who they are.
Of course. You can never actually talk to the concept of equality without actually realizing that we've smuggled in all of these unconscious elements in our own belief systems. And it's like I was describing to you before. It's like, we look with our eyes, and even though we have blind spots where our retinas are, I don't know if the listeners know much about human physiology, but you can actually test it where you can actually block out one eye and move your finger around until you actually cannot physically see it. And so this really teaches us that the mind will actually make up what should be there as well if it doesn't have the data. So when it comes to something like equality, if we don't actually have data on everything, we'll actually fill in what we assume and model this concept of equality in, whether it's actually true or not.
And even just, this push for equality is so much about
Is
getting
this
bigger
men versus women that you're talking about?
But again, primarily in corporate. But then that same principle doesn't apply to, let's say, minorities. It doesn't apply to, equality for all sentient beings like animals or innocent, as well.
I vote for the cow for CEO.
I mean, they have some more intuition and compassion than some people that I've met in corporate.
Yeah.
But
and maternity leave for her as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's just been another one of those blanket terms that I could not subscribe to because, in defining what you said before, what equality is, it doesn't, balance is not always what is necessary, but equality is also not balance.
No, it's a paradigm.
Yeah. And equality is also not harmony where, it's all parts working together for a unified goal. It's not justice either, where you were talking about the ethical dilemma or the trolley problem. What is equality in that situation? Can you relay that to people who may not be familiar with that ethical dilemma?
The trolley problem highlights the concept of deontology versus utilitarianism, where deontology speaks to the principle, the rule that we must apply, and utilitarianism about understanding the subjectivity and the nature of being able to weigh things up. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, so to speak. And so with the trolley problem, it has 5 people tied to a train track, and then a separate track next to it with only 1 person tied to it. And a train is approaching, and you're standing at a lever, and the train is going to run over the 5 people. But you can pull a lever and consciously let it kill 1 person instead of the 5. What do you do? And so most people, by default, through deontology, want to say, well, pull the lever and only kill 1 person because you're still netting 4 lives. But what isn't given here is the context. What if it was a young child tied on the one track versus elderly people with, say, terminal cancer? And there were 5 of them on the other track. How do you use utility now to weigh this up?
Thank you. And we can see that not just in this example, but equality as a whole is an invisible model. It's a framework of how people use it to see the world. The world, like any other paradigm, it is quite loaded. And equality itself is clearly a paradigm and not a flat truth, like the example given. So when we look at equality in the world, can you talk to how we're playing in these social systems where we think we're trying to create equality? And before I even go into that, I'll just bring it to us. As we were planning this episode, you were giving the example that we don't necessarily have equality in this relationship. And that's not inherently a bad thing. There are parts where things need to lean in certain directions because of who we are and how we operate and our different needs and
different strengths, different deficits.
Yeah. But by, the world's definition of, equality, then it should be balanced. It should be equal at all times. We just need to flatten our uniqueness in order to have this perception of giving everyone, equal rights. So yeah, can you talk to more of the social systems that people are playing into where we think we're creating equality, but really it's games within games?
I mean, you mentioned it before with like the corporate game as well. And when I mentioned like CEO positions, like you'll hear about this on the TV and they're talking about it. They want to bring, more women and more ethnic individuals into these high-level positions, and the thing is, unless more opportunities are being created, then what happens is this paradigm of equality now means that if you want to give it to one group, then another group now inherently has to deal with less. And so it doesn't even account for the fact that what is the capability of, say, the women or these minorities in, say, a CEO position, because they might not necessarily be as skilled and get in just because of the quotas that need to be met in the name of equality. And so I'm not saying that there aren't women and minorities who aren't better than many men at these roles. But what we're actually not doing is looking at the model itself of companies and CEOs and these roles to begin with. Because are they based on equality? Are they actually built in a way that's fair and even equitable, we might say, for everyone? And so I would generally say no with that. We have these top-down models where, and I used the story before of this little cartoon that I saw when I was much younger, of a whole bunch of birds on a tree at different levels. And at the very top of the tree, you've got one bird sitting there, and then below it, you've got two birds sitting there with a bit of bird poo from the one above. And then they poo further down onto the next row, and then you get to the very bottom, and they're completely covered, but they don't get to poo on anyone else. It's this pyramid model. It's this top-down element as well that we see in a lot of areas of life as well. And so even hierarchies themselves are a type of paradigm that aren't a hard and fast truth as well. But I would say that these top-down models that we see, particularly in the workforce, are a classic example where equality isn't addressed at the systemic level, but smaller models are trying to be implemented within an already, I would call it, unequal system on the whole. But going into that would probably be its complete own episode.
And it's not just, and we're not here talking about men or women. Like, men have, their own extreme disadvantages in many systems, and women have their own disadvantages. But
of course. I'm only talking CEO positions. I'm not talking the rest of the workforce.
No, of course. But as you said, that these models are run on competition, control, hierarchy, on drive, speed, control, pace, all of these things that are also quite, inherently masculine, and they're not making space for the feminine. But again, that's another topic. So even within one type of system, which is corporate, we see that equality is trying to be created within unequal systems, and this becomes a performance. This isn't about transformation, because the inherent structure of what corporate is, it is a pyramid. It is inherently masculine, whereas the operations are more feminine. This isn't about transformation, because it will rubber band back to how it was meant to perform. That's what the structure does. We spoke about soul architecture.
The rules loosen and nature's allowed to sort of play its course.
Yeah.
But I would like to add that even though they frame this through the lens of equality, back on my example, it's actually not. It's enforced rules that's more about equity policy. They want the same outcome, not the equality of opportunity. But the thing is, even though it is as you mentioned, it's about control and hierarchy, and it's very competitive, a lot of masculine energy. Well, you have a more masculine leaning system. You're naturally going to get more masculine people filling those sorts of roles or rising to the top of those systems. And that's why we need to implement these policies to force a type of equitable or equality-based outcome, even though it's not naturally what would occur. Hence why the policies need to be put in place.
And even taking, some of those people who push, promote, want all of this diverse DEI, call it what you want, equality, but they're only pushing for equality in one system, for women to be paid more, and, just very micro kind of, I don't know, maybe micro is not the right word, but they're not applying this in principle to other systems. So if we look at, if we look at food, for example, how are they applying the principle of equality to food in their life? How are they applying equality to relationships?
Can you give an example?
In their life.
The equality of food. Interesting.
Well, that could be a whole other episode, but, whether it's eating because you're causing harm to someone else, so the whole vegan argument, or, how is it that some countries have more, they throw out more food than other countries have to eat? So,
and America took that personally.
So, this equality where people are wanting to adhere by it, how are they actually seeing that it's not actually being played out on many different systems? But we'll step away from systems because let's look at the individual dimension. And, as much as we could sit here and talk and advocate for equality in the world and all of these things that we know are so vehemently wrong, this is only a not only, but there are many other forces at play, but by large, this inequality lives in our collective consciousness where it's reflecting our inner inequality. How, from my example, like I've overused one part of myself, but have completely forgotten, let's say, the achievement, orientation or the drive part, leaning way too much on that, but not respecting, the other part that has a very small voice and has never gotten any limelight per se, or any attention, or any, care and compassion. So
do I not give you enough attention?
No, you definitely do, my love. So if I were to advocate for our inequality in this, how am I actually creating this within? Can you give some examples?
I mean, going back to food inequality, like you got me thinking on this topic now, and I'm definitely guilty of food inequality, where I'll eat a lot of food to service those emotions deep down buried within me that I don't that I haven't dealt with. So disproportionate amount of time and attention, especially, and not even just eating, but like even in like cooking and preparing, like just the love of food itself is something I take very deeply. But when you want me to sit there and sort of process emotions, or not that you ask for that or anything, but that there I could just like stare at a blank wall and I like not even know what to do, so I won't give it the time and attention that it deserves as well, creating its own sort of inequality within my own inner systems now. And but my big one as well is that I'd consider my mind, it's a bit late, so I'm a little bit tired tonight, but generally my mental faculties I would say are stronger, and I'd say a part that I sort of lack in is definitely in my body. It's not as strong as it could be. It's not as active as it could be as well. And so, even the equality, like we have to take bigger and bigger models. We have to zoom out to see the model and the totality of what it is that we want equality within, because it fits within a framework. And so that's my own example that I'd give. How about yourself, my love?
Oh, many. Again, like the mind over the body, learning how to unwind this very deep paradigm like you, where we've overly lent on, giving more attention to one part or dealing to one part, but not another part. So, in this case, the body is the minority. The body is the one that never gets the CEO position, and the mind has always taken all of the higher paying positions. But from a neuroscience perspective,
the world also sort of respects that as well.
Of course.
I mean, again, you mentioned corporate. It's how much do they love working employees down into the ground before, they know they'll burn out and leave. Yeah. Some industries, like, I was listening to, like banking, thrives on that, churning through the workers, knowing that they're going to leave anyway. And it's like, well, the problem with that is, I can't recall exactly all the details, but one of the biggest retainers of employees is actually compassion. And it's like, there's no compassion in banking.
Remember the teller who deposits cash? We've seen her twice.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, very devoid of life, definitely devoid of compassion. Does not love her job at all.
No, but why would you?
Yeah.
Being a bank teller.
Exactly.
You get a lot of people there that just want their money, or just to hurry up, the lines are too long, and I'm angry that you're the only teller open. It's like, well, I could close this one too.
But what we're pointing in the direction of is, where are you treating parts of yourself unequally? Mind, body, soul, the part of you that has drive, the part of you that is creative, the part of you that regulates food, the part of you that wants recognition, so on and so forth. Because the more that you see inequalities outside of you, this is of course a reflection of what we're experiencing internally as well, as within so without.
That's a deep, like, it's a very powerful spiritual principle as well. If you've heard of the Kabbalion in 1908, they speak about the 7 hermetic principles in which reality is actually founded upon. And the second principle is called the law of correspondence, or the principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. And so that principle is talking to all parts of the universe are in correspondence with all other parts. And like our mind, like our emotions, like our body, and even our spirit, all of these systems are in some form of correspondence with each other. And, you know, we look at examples. You might look at, say, at like a narcissistic parent and the child who becomes parentified, and they have to parent their adult parent. Like it's these distortions are playing out externally, and then what happens is that's also corresponding to their own inner world. And that's why I've seen it enough on subreddits and such, of these adult children learning to grow up that don't know any different. And the coding is so deep that many of them need intense levels of therapy, or alternative like approaches, such as like soul searching for years before they can really connect to just how deep that distortion runs. Like the example with the past life, with the client who, you know, men equals good, women equals bad. And, you know, I've seen a lot of it with my own clients as well. Their masculine lives are generally better. They have more freedom. They have more rights. They still have a lot of limitation, but there's still freedom within the paradigm in which they're allowed to do that. And so women generally fall even under that as well. So the distortions playing out in society, like the birds, trickle down all the way to the bottom.
I want you to share the story about when your dad had to take the car to Sydney, but let's bring it to an individual example before we speak to a cosmic dimension, because it also further deepens the point that equality is also circumstantial. There is context. There are many individual needs that we have in this life which also dictate whether equality is applicable right here, right now.
Yeah, so when I was young, my dad, he worked for a car manufacturer, and they needed cars to test drive on the road, and you could put your name down and however many Ks you could promise to complete in, say, like a 3 or 4 day weekend. And so my father decided to put his name down, and he thought, go to Sydney, and he'd take me on a father-son trip, because a boy needs to grow into a man. And, you know, you got to appreciate his attempt. A for effort, and a golden star for him on that one. But my sister, who's very close in age as well, and very quite outspoken, if she's not happy with something, you'll know about it. She basically was very unhappy. She was 8. I think she was 8 at the time. And she was very unhappy about that, so she wanted to come too. Now, I believe it was a ute, and it was a 3-seater. And basically, I don't know if there was much argument or back and forth, but my father, being a bit softer, caved and allowed her to come. And it was a good holiday. I have nothing bad to sort of say about it, but looking back on that time, it makes me really connect with what my father was getting at with that principle of, you know, a boy needs to grow into a man, and there's things that a boy can only learn from his father. And I don't recall having many memories with my father alone to learn masculine skills and learning how to grow up into being a man, because there was a lot of equality through egalitarianism. You know, we all got poured the same amount in our cups at the table, and, you know, if any money was given, it was given equally to all of us, which is great. But even boys and girls have different needs from each of their parents, and understanding that, say, what my sister needed versus from my father versus what I needed was quite different. And even though you might say that was an example of equality, we both had the opportunity to go. At the same time, it makes me wonder if there was more that was missed out on had it just been father and son, because there were needs that I do feel were missed. And not just from the trip alone, there's a lot more I could say to that dynamic. But that trip was I want to say like a missed opportunity to actually identify if there was basically, you know, like my behaviors and stuff. And look, I was a kid. I was playing with toys and video games and stuff like that, as a kid does. But might I have seen the world different if I had his complete attention for the duration of that trip? It was a 10-hour drive each way, on top of the 2 nights that we stayed there. It's something I reflect on from time to time, and particularly when I read other people's stories when it comes to the development of child psychology.
Let's zoom out and look at this through the cosmic lens, one of our favorite lenses. Even how, when we look at the belief systems around equality, you know, what is equal in my eyes is very different could be very different in your eyes. You know, for example, your sister said in her eyes, equality is we all get to go, whereas in your perspective, in your eyes at the time, equality meant something else. It's
what
like
other boys needed with their father, I needed too. That was equality.
That's right. So all of these belief systems come from somewhere. And this is by far the work that we do, and it's past lives. There are, as in the client that we had and you have, where flattening the narrative, but success and failure is deeply embodied in our unconscious rules. So we come in this life and we don't know why we're so fervently passionate or dispassionate or attracted to something that is being driven over lifetimes. And it could even be ancestral lines, so family traumas passed down as survival strategies, and this is how we know how to be. So we go out and advocate for something that we may not even have direct experience of, but we are so avidly drawn to it. For example, it might be animals in one life, or, women and children in another. And even early imprinting. So we find that we build our model, as you were talking about, before we can even reason. So the roles, you might see that your father worked tirelessly and your mother was never available to you. So that's going to build a perception of what is fair. So, as women, we might go and be like, well, I don't want to be a homemaker, so I'll go run the corporate tower. So you're going to then form this perception that, well, I want equal rights because you saw your mother not have that within the home. And then maybe your story is a bit more embedded in finances. There were never enough finances. So now you're really passionate about equity in finances, and so on and so forth.
But all of these, the past lives, the ancestry, and even the childhood imprinting and the roles, they're all leading back to the concept and going back to the Kabbalion, the 6th principle of cause and effect. A lot of things, especially like when we explore past lives and even ancestry in our sessions, a lot of it becomes very clear in a way that, if you see a fire, that the closer you get, the hotter it's going to be. In the same way that the more you can go deeper into these elements, the more obvious they actually very much become. And so again, at the level of our unconscious and higher selves, there's really just these, they think in terms of archetypes, in terms of paradigms, in terms of models, and equality is just another cosmic model that one might wish to explore. And I would say the highest level that what I've learned, the highest level of equality that one can apply is love. It's love, not just in terms of compassion, but I think of the 2 most important spiritual currencies being time and attention. So making sure that if you want to embody the paradigm of equality in the highest order, it's to really give adequate time and attention to every part of your being, inside and outside, and then even up to cosmically as well. Because really what you'll do is you'll then naturally begin to understand what parts need different things. If say, you're driving your car and the oil light comes on. You're not going to go fill up your wiper fluid. It might be lower than your oil, but just because it's lower than your oil, you don't need them to be equally full, or even if it's equally empty in this case. It's understanding that different things need different things at different times.
And that's what, going back, what we're inviting people to look at is that there is something beyond equality. Is it equality or is it integration, where there is space for, let's say, the mind and the body, the action and the rest, the masculine and the feminine? It's not sameness, but it's wholeness. And it's not fairness, but is it harmony? So whatever it is and isn't, we are simply inviting you to further explore, what does this actually mean? And in the case of the client that I shared the reel on, she doesn't need to be equal to men in order to have it better or have a great life.
Well, in that greater paradigm of the corporate world, she would.
Yes.
But she's not actually going up one level. She's not zooming out a level.
No.
To actually see that she's actually upholding another paradigm.
That's right.
The games within games.
Games within games. But what she was being invited to do in that session, the advice from her higher self, was to reclaim her feminine essence, create space, create slowness, and was certainly not to fill her vista with that of other people. So we resonated with this topic as well, because there is a futility of talking about equality without giving respect to the inner realm, without giving respect to the cosmic dimensions and integration, and also without pointing in the direction that there are systems and games within games, again, as we've mentioned, that you're just kind of moving around the deck chairs in the Titanic. It's all sinking, but it's structurally flawed. You're not going to really achieve what we want. So are we going to keep on asking broken systems for equality? Or instead, can we start asking, where am I treating myself unequally? And where have I mistaken these paradigms for truth? Final remarks?
I think it's important when you mentioned about asking broken systems for equality, because even understanding, is the system broken to begin with? Keep zooming out. Keep going bigger than that. Because, again, as I mentioned, like my advice and what I've taken away from all of this is understanding that love, particularly through time and attention to every part at every level, is the best way to live and express that paradigm of equality. And really that gets back to learning how to be present. Because then when you're present, you can give your full time and attention to everything and understand what it needs. So then you can create a type of equality that services your own needs, the needs of others and the world, and even the needs of the cosmos, all at the same time. And if there's any purpose to equality, I would say it's something like that.
Beautifully said. We'll end there. Thank you for listening.